Qualifying practice in a moment.
The Formula One World Championship is brought to you on Eurosport by Ford, Formula One's most successful team. Hitachi. Elf Oil, World Champion. And Goodyear.
Hello and welcome on Eurosport. Hello and welcome from Imola for the San Marino Grand Prix at the Autodromo Enzo e Dino Ferrari, and that's in Italy. We're very close to Bologna. We're also very close to the start of the first session on a very sunny circuit. And John, I'm happy to say it's very warm. It looked overcast and cold this morning, but the weather, well, it's clear, dry, and about 27 degrees.
Thank you, Allard. Yes, ideal weather. I see a breeze blowing across the circuit, and fortunately the humidity that we had here on Thursday afternoon has dropped considerably and a lot more comfortable, not just for us in our commentary booth, but in fact for everybody, and in particular those 28 gentlemen who very shortly indeed are going to commence the first qualifying session of this San Marino Grand Prix, the first of the European Grand Prix that we're going to be following throughout the year.
So this morning's session, or the two sessions, 1.5 hours in total. Ayrton Senna ended the fastest time of the morning, a 1:21.598. Second fastest, teammate Damon Hill, was just over a second slower, but then Damon missed out on the last 15 minutes of the session when he ended in the gravel. Third, Michael Schumacher, and then it's Gerhard Berger. John, I suppose the four names you expect in the top four after that 1.5 hour session.
No real surprises, but interestingly enough, Ayrton Senna back on form, as is the Williams Renault, and his time was half a second faster than Alain Prost's pole time from last year, and that's just a little tease, I think, for what we're going to expect in this 1 hour session this afternoon, and following that tomorrow afternoon as well. And believe me, there has been enormous amount of work going on within the Williams Renault team, and even at Benetton Ford, they're not laying back on the laurels of the last two Grand Prix wins. They've been working very hard, as has Ford, who has got a very revised Z-Tech R engine to suit the top-end power nature of the Imola circuit.
The green flag's out, so the cars can go out onto the circuit. Just continue the times from the morning session. Mika Häkkinen 5th after a fire caused by a split oil line. Then on his return to Formula One, J.J Lehto 6th, Nicola Larini 7th, Pierluigi Martini 8th, 9th Martin Brundle, and in 10th position Rubens Barrichello. Then it's Gianni Morbidelli and Michele Alboreto completing the top 12. If we go further down the list, we find the first Sauber in 18th position, and that's Heinz-Harald Frentzen, and the first Pacific in 21st position. So a disappointing performance by the Sauber and a good performance by Gasco.
Well, Sauber were running their new Mercedes V10 engine with pneumatic valves, and in fact both cars had a small leak problem from that system, so they did in fact do a very quick engine change. Wendlinger and Frentzen only got out towards the end of the session. In fact, Wendlinger had 3 laps and Frentzen had only 7 laps. So really this qualifying session is where the weekend starts for the Sauber Mercedes-Benz team.
27th and 28th, so possible non-qualifiers, Beretta and Belmondo. Beretta had a problem and Belmondo had a slight problem, but did do 23 laps, and well, he only has to find a second to be in the ballpark. We see the Imola circuit from the helicopter, and we're waiting for the first pictures of the cars that are definitely out there, because we can hear them leave the pits. And well, John, I suppose it's going to be Senna or Hill on the provisional pole.
That's a little bit contentious, Allard, after the 2 victories we've seen from Benetton Ford, but it's not a big surprise. and that isn't any big surprise either. To see Sauber out as quickly as possible, bearing in mind what we've said just a moment ago about the time that they lost in that 90-minute, or the two, in fact, 45-minute sessions, as is that unofficial practice session as of 1994.
Karl Wendlinger, his second year at Sauber, qualified 7th and 19th in Brazil and Ida, finished 6th in Brazil, scoring a point, and retired on lap 69 in the Pacific Grand Prix when he had a little coming together with Michele Alboreto.
Well, I think to be fair to Wendlinger, he was well and truly attacked from behind by Michele Alboreto, and Wendlinger more or less the innocent party, and his race finished sadly when he could have been a point scorer for the second time in 94.
Both Sauber drivers actually scored points, because Heinz-Harald Frentzen scored his first World Championship points in Ida with 5th position. That 1:41 from Karl Wendlinger. So far the fastest time, that was on his first lap, and now a 25.584. So the first lap proper lap from Karl Wendlinger, a 1:25.584. And John, this morning Ayrton Senna, although it was cooler than it is at the moment, the 1:21.598, the track will probably be a little bit quicker, the car might be a little quicker. Are we going to see a 1:20 lap?
I think anybody who gets into the 1:21 area, that's about the best we will expect this afternoon. Although the track will get cleaner, but the ambient temperature has risen quite quickly in the 2 hours we had between the stop of the practice session and the start of qualifying. And that does affect performance, particularly at the top end. And this is a circuit, we've said it before, it's all about power. You've got a very long straight. It's something like 14 to 15 seconds of full throttle. And that's one of the longest applications of that on any Grand Prix circuit throughout the calendar. So ambient temperature rising equates to loss of horsepower, particularly top-end power.
Heinz-Harald Frentzen is currently the fastest driver on the circuit, a 1:24.013, and that's a time that would have put him 6th fastest this morning. And that's only his 9th lap of the day, John.
A good time by Frentzen, and I mean, the guy for sure is very, very quick, and with his experience in Formula One, really limited to the winter testing and to 2 Grand Prix, he is a man to keep an eye on throughout this season.
Well, there's another man who surprised a lot of people, Gianni Morbidelli. And as Jackie Oliver said yesterday, with Fittipaldi and Morbidelli, he thinks it's probably the strongest driver lineup he's ever had after the years with Warwick and Cheever.
He's been very generous in his comments to Gianni Morbidelli. They signed the driver. He is in effect a paying driver, but they've got a bit of a result. They've got a paying driver who actually is very effective indeed. And Jackie Oliver, very complimentary, as we said, about the quality of drivers he's got this year. Fittipaldi, Morbidelli, young, aggressive and hungry, and not a bad way to go for a team like Footwork, who are in the course of rebuilding.
What we learn on the track serves you on the road. Eagles from Goodyear. A change for the better.
1:24.482 for Gianni Morbidelli, and that's a little bit faster than the Italian went this morning. So an improvement for Morbidelli, who lives in Pesaro, Italy, and raced for Dallara, Minardi, Ferrari and Lamborghini.
if we look towards the back of the session this morning, equally competitive, in fact probably a lot tougher in many respects. And the two people on the bubble were Beretta in the Larousse Ford and Paul Belmondo in his Pacific Ilmore. Good performance from Bertrand Gachot in the other Pacific, but Pedro Lamy in the Lotus Mugen Honda, really he's the man, 25th quickest. Roland Ratzenberger 0.3 of a second slower, so that's going to be very, very tight indeed. And such is the change in regulations and the corresponding tightening up of the field. There's nowhere you can sit back and say, well, I'm fairly secure.
Gianni Morbidelli completing his third flying lap in a time that is 24.218, so that is second fastest at the moment, and 24.2 is, well, was this morning easily in the top 10. So not a good performance, and there is Paul Belmondo, has not had the best of luck. The team went to Mugello to go testing, but as most teams went there, a lot of, rain.
Well, you'd think it might have been wet on the exit from the chicane for Paul Belmondo because he had the car well and truly sideways. And in effect, Pacific Grand Prix, one of the two new teams in Formula One this year, it's very difficult indeed, and to try and run two cars both equally and well, enormous task. Certainly Gachot is the number one driver in the team. In fact, I understand he's probably got a small shareholding in Pacific Grand Prix as well. So focus very much on Bertrand Gachot, but nonetheless Paul Belmondo trying his best to get two cars into the race for the first time for Pacific.
Martin Brundle had a problem this morning with a cut tyre. Now, he probably cut that out on the circuit somewhere. An unusual problem. Restricted his laps and progress, but Martin, John, very disappointed not to finish in either.
He thought he had a podium position really in his sights, and unfortunately, like with Mika Hakkinen, and we've seen in the season so far, it just got too warm, and finally then the whole thing shut down. McLaren have worked extremely hard. They've worked in the areas around the radiators to try and get as much airflow through the radiator boxes, the radiators themselves, to overcome the overheating problem that's basically dogged the team since the start of the season. And in fact, recently they were in France testing at a circuit known as Danielson, where they were doing specific aerodynamic tests to study airflow over and through the car. Well, Beretta in his Lotus on the grass. And back to Martin Brundle. So Brundle out, this is his first flying lap. And a little bit of wagging of the tail from Brundle as he comes on to the start-finish straight. And we have to wait to see, well, fourth quickest, 1:24.443, not bad for an opener.
Not bad, because that's equaling his time he did this morning. So Martin Brundle as well, we're looking for an improvement, and if people keep improving the way they are, John, I think we should see an 80-second lap around this circuit before long. Whoop. Olivier Beretta spinning off with his Larousse. John, we're going to see that same color scheme in Monaco probably as well, because there's physically not enough time to bring it back to the old Tourtel livery. We're going to take a short break here on Eurosport, and then we'll be back with the rest of qualifying. Frentzen is currently fastest. That's what he says, and all the advertising around the circuit will probably be Tourtel as well then. It's all the same group anyway. Yes,
it's not too bad, thank you.
Sorry I was late. Sorry.
No racial comments, please, on air.
Dust it every now and again. Welcome back here on Eurosport, and we're back with Benetton and Michael Schumacher. But just a few seconds ago, Nicola Larini has demoted Heinz-Harald Frentzen to second with a very good lap, a 1:23.282, and that is nearly a full second faster than Larini went this morning.
At the sound of that V12 Ferrari engine going past our commentary position, well, I would say that's revving well beyond the rumoured 15,000 RPM. That is their rev limit. It sounded like it was being tortured as Larini got that provisional pole lap, but here's a man I think will very quickly indeed demote Larini to being second quickest. And I wish we could just see into the Williams pits, because I'm quite sure Damon Hill, Ayrton Senna, Frank Williams, Patrick Head are glued to their monitor, because this is the man that has haunted them all year. Slightly disappointing this morning though for Benetton and Ford. They didn't get the kind of performance with this revised Ford Z-Tech-R engine. And Schumacher just chucking the car all around the circuit.
Both Schumacher and Lehto claiming they did not have enough traction, but Schumacher has got enough traction for a 1:22.564, and well, of course, that's also quicker than this morning, but 22.564 currently fastest in front of Nicola Larini, Frentzen, and now Lehto is in second, then Larini, Frentzen, Morbidelli and Wellinger. So a Benetton 1-2, but we haven't seen either Williams out on the circuit yet.
That time of Schumacher exactly 1 second slower than Senna achieved this morning, and Schumacher, you can see how hard he's trying right over the curb on the exit of Acqua Minerale, and now here's his principal protagonist, Ayrton Senna, and the atmosphere in Williams here in Imola is very, very professional and very determined indeed. They are not happy about the performance of their car in the first two Grand Prix. They felt that certainly the outcome of the first corner shunt was not representative of what they would have expected in the Grand Prix itself. They thought that Senna could win in Japan. They're determined to make sure he does win here this weekend.
Fighting spirit. Senna going up the hill to the chicane, being watched by, of course, Frank Williams and the rest of the Williams team. Through the chicane, and now it's a rundown where Damon Hill this morning ended up in the gravel.
Well, I've got a feeling this is one of those laps that Senna, over many years, has just managed to drag out of a car. And this is, in my view, Senna at his most committed and most serious. And we have to wait a few more seconds now as he exits onto the start-finish straight. Well, 22.4 is 0.8 of a second slower than he achieved this morning, but it is his first flying and timed lap.
And it's good enough for provisional pole so far. So Ayrton Senna, a 1:22.430. Then it's Michael Schumacher on a 1:12. Oh, and there's a very big shunt.
And that is indeed, that's at the exit of... Well, looking at it, it's difficult to tell who it is. Upside down, that car, both left-hand wheels, front and rear, are off. And we have to see the car pushed back. It's Rubens Barrichello, the man who's lying currently second in the World Championship. And that is a serious off for Barrichello. The red flag is out. The session has been stopped. And Professor Watkins straight to Rubens Barrichello, who's sitting in his car. He's now being attended. And we have just to wait a moment or two until we can see clearly what the situation is, but this very quick indeed to an incident, a heavy accident like this, heavy impact on the right-hand side of the car as we see. And the first thing that Professor Watkins does when he gets to a driver, well, it's going through the Marlboro, oh yes. Literally, something in that Marlboro chicane went very badly wrong indeed, and it looks to me like something in the left front suspension. And the steering, you can see, maybe that was, oh, and a very, very big impact indeed. High up into the tyre barrier, The advertising signs just above that. So Professor Watkins now in attendance to Rubens Barrichello. The first thing to do is to stabilize any driver in this incident. The helmet is now off. They've got neck collars, and they will take as long as they feel is necessary to ensure the driver's comfort and safety. And then finally, when they're satisfied, they can begin to take Rubens from his car.
While the doctors are working on Rubens Barrichello, getting him out of the car, let's go through the standings at the moment. Ayrton Senna, Michael Schumacher are first and second. Then it's J.J Lehto. Nicola Larini is fourth. Heinz-Harald Frentzen fifth. Gianni Morbidelli sixth. Carl Wendlinger seventh. Martin Brundle eighth. And Ukio Katayama is ninth. Then Pierluigi Martini and Eric Bernard. Johnny Herbert 12th. Christian Fittipaldi 13th. Oliver Penn is 14th. Mark Blundell 15th. Then Pedro Lamy, Bertrand Gachot, Roland Ratzenberger and Paul Bamondo complete the top 19. And Olivier Beretta has done one single lap in 20th place. And there is 41 minutes left in this session, which will resume after Rubens Barrichello is out of the car. Well, John, a very big impact, and partly because Rubens Barrichello missed the tyre wall altogether. I mean, he just flew straight over the tyre wall. Look, into the fence.
Well, fortunately there is debris fencing there. That's mandatory around a Grand Prix circuit these days, and that debris fencing did a superb job. It not only retained Barrichello's Jordan within the circuit, it kept all the debris, or the majority of it that we can see, also within the circuit. Here we again see, and it's so quick. I mean, that's a fourth gear, probably fifth gear, almost flat out, 130, 40 miles an hour coming through there. So that debris fencing certainly preventing more serious incidents than what is already a very serious one indeed. This is just the section of circuit. Here again we see Barrichello coming through.
It looks like something broke on that car, John. I mean, it just didn't turn left, did it?
It's, to me, it looked like something on the left front suspension, maybe in the steering. It's difficult to tell. It happens very quickly, and really what you have to watch is the right front wheel to see, because it looks as if there is lock on the left front, but watching the right, you need to see it again and again. But certainly something went dramatically wrong for Rubens coming through that Marlborough chicane, and that was his first. He had just completed, in fact, an out lap, and he was on his first flying lap. So Rubens would have been on it as hard as he could do, and just coming up to the completion of that first full flying lap.
There we see all the marshals being busy getting Rubens out of the car and being very careful with his neck, John.
Just looking at the circuit, I mean, at that point of the circuit, there are curbs. Now, it is that curb that caused the car to fly. Now, curbing is on the side of a track to indicate to the driver that is the limit of the track, because if you don't have curbing there, then the tendency is for drivers to run wider and wider. But what it did do is, in effect, act as a launch pad for Rubens Barrichello, and he did, in fact, as we said, clear the tyre wall, and it was only the strength and integrity of that retaining fence behind it which kept the car within the circuit, and that's, again, testament to the security and safety that is now mandatory at any Grand Prix circuit, or any circuit, in fact, running an international motor racing event.
So, well, watch it again. Wow, it just didn't turn left.
Well, you can see he's on the brakes. I mean, he realized probably midway through the right-hand part of the Marlborough chicane that there was something going wrong. He then, in a fraction of a second later, knew it was going wrong because it was in real trouble. There you can see the car, massive sideways impact, comes down nose first, both right-hand side suspension wheels are off, rolls over once. Rubens' arm, his right hand off the steering wheel, being flailed around, finishes up, upside down. The marshals very quick indeed. You can see already on their way. Luckily, all the debris from the car staying within the circuit. Professor Watkins, who is in the pit lane, ready in a car. The medical centre, unfortunately, again, very close to this point of the circuit.
So now everybody being really careful with Barrichello. They just want to make sure he hasn't got any neck injury. John, there's a program which the doctor does to make sure they can actually move Barrichello.
Well, the principal thing is to make sure the driver is stable before you do anything. Helmet can at times be, in enthusiasm or in concern, be removed too quickly. And that's why people like Professor Watkins are on hand. He is the Formula One, the doctor. Nothing can be done until he arrives. As we saw, Rubens' helmet was taken off, and so obviously he's lucid, but that support collar is placed on his neck as a precaution. They've got a special seat which is slid inside the driver's seat, and that enables the driver then to be pulled out of the car with support of his entire body and not just pulling out by the straps on a driver's uniform. So the medical team here at Imola working and stabilizing Rubens as he has a drip, which is a normal function, and they're looking into the Jordan garage now. Team members showing great concern.
And this all happened some 19 minutes into the session, just under 19 minutes into the session, when Rubens was on his first flying lap. Well, the doctors, everybody fairly relaxed around Barrichello. There we see the ambulance, which will take him to the medical center and then probably to the hospital, John. Or you think they might go straight to the hospital?
In my view, the first thing that you must do is take a driver to the medical center. It's, again, this thing of stabilization. There's no urgency. If there was urgency, then you would be seeing a great deal more action. And what we're seeing now is actually a very positive thing. Although it seems very long and protracted, the longer these situations are allowed to continue at the side of the circuit, the better the outcome is going to be. And my first option would be to take Barrichello to the medical center, and then they can do a series of checks. These medical centers equally have got to be to a minimum standard. And one of the responsibilities of Professor Watkins is to select the best medical personnel from within this area, Imola, Bologna, and they are on call throughout the weekend, and there are a number of hospitals within the area equally who are on hand and are prepared for any incident. It doesn't have to be a racing incident, as we've seen. It can be just simply somebody in the spectators may slip and break a leg, or anything that can happen.
Barrichello, there we see the neck collar around his neck, and there, John, I think they're very, very careful with necks these days. I mean, John Lazy's not racing here because he's got a crushed vertebrae. J.J. Lehto's just back from a neck injury, and, well, let's hope Rubens has not got anything.
And remember, there was a test earlier before the season began when, in fact, Eddie Irvine, Rubens Barrichello's teammate, testing at Manicourt, caught a damp part of the circuit on a quick lap, spun off backwards, same thing into a solid wall, and he got a serious whiplash, but no injury to Eddie Irvine in that moment. So necks appear to be right now the most vulnerable part. Previously it was a leg in a driver because the car safety going back 10 or 15 years ago was not to the level it is currently. And the safety cell, the survival cell that the driver is in, is so strong these days that you can have a massive impact and still get yourself out of the car relatively unhurt. Very heavily bruised, of course, but not any serious injury. Well, looking at it again, looking at it and trying to watch in slow motion as Barrichello, something caused him to put left hand down, as it were. The back end came away very quickly indeed. That didn't look, in my view, to be caused by a driver error. That looked to be something mechanical in the car, but until the car is taken back to the garage and examined by the Jordan team, it's pure speculation on our part. But certainly the consequence was Barrichello left the track at very high speed indeed. The curbing on the exit of the corner, here we see it once again. The curbing caused the car to get airborne, and the car, well, it probably just kissed the top of the tire barrier, and that's the depth of 5 or 6 tires, and that probably was in fact what took off the right front corner and then subsequently the right rear corner. But a lot of energy being dissipated in that incident. High-speed accident, car comes to a stop in a very short space.
John, when you're watching there, in that particular chicane, you know the cars are very quick. I mean, they are the quickest cars in the world, and they're going very fast. But maybe it's when it goes wrong you actually realize how quick they're going.
Well, you're literally a passenger. I mean, you're coming into the Marlborough chicane. You've exited out of Rivazza, and the second part of Rivazza, you're in 4th gear. So 4th gear up into 5th. You always feel you want to go flat out through Marlborough, but you're never quite sure you can make it. But you're talking about 150 miles an hour at least.
We're going to take a commercial break here on Eurosport. Ayrton Senna is fastest, and we'll be back shortly. Rubens Barrichello's car is being taken off the circuit. We're watching positions 7 through to 12. And 1 to 6 is still Senna, Schumacher, Lehto, Larini and Frentzen. And then Gianni Morbidelli. 13th to 18th is on our screen now. There's a Jordan Mechanics and Ian Phillips trying to cover up the car. And they'll take it back, Chuck, and they'll do a pretty good investigation, I would think.
Well, certainly each part of the car will be taken back. It'll be sent off for analysis. They'll get a proper report on every part of the car that they would consider needing inspection. And really that cover over the car is to stop all the gapers and the ghouls around the place, to put the car back into the transporter. And fortunately this is literally the end of the pit block, so that the car will be very shortly back with the team at the back of the garage, and they will then begin the process of stripping down, or stripping off the right side of the car that is heavily damaged. Looking at John Moulton, team manager of the Cecil Jordan Hart team. Eddie Irvine here, who's here in fact is a competitor in the Porsche Super Cup race series. This is the first round of that race series, and he's going to be going out to practice a little later in the afternoon. And as usual, pit lane, very busy indeed.
A very wide pit lane here in Imola. Also, John, it's one of those circuits where you do not lose an enormous amount of time driving in and out of the pits. So we've been talking about pit stops already, and 2 or 3 pit stops, or definitely 2, maybe 3.
Well, just once again we're watching this moment so fast, and no chance at all. Barrichello was a passenger from midway through the chicane, and sitting there just waiting for the impact to take place. Not a very pleasant thought for any driver, but it's one that most Grand Prix drivers at some stage regrettably do have to go through. But going back to what you were saying about the circuit and the number of pit stops, it is a very quick entry, it's a very quick exit, and the equation in my mind that teams have got to decide is whether to go with the D compound tyre, which is the softer, the more competitive tyre, and maybe make 3 pit stops against using the C compound tyre and trying to get away with 2 pit stops.
I know what you're going to say, John. But having seen this for now, I think about the 20th time, we are still waiting when the green flag will be out again at 13:40 exact. So that is another 5.5 minutes to go before the restart. And, well, Jochen Maas just walked into our commentary booth. Jochen, what a chance.
Yeah, terrible accident, reasonably predictable over the development of the years. I feel very much that the curbs, the present curbs on many circuits are definitely too high, and they launched the car. We've seen similar accidents. When I think of Warwick's accident in Hockenheim, he was lucky then, but he was also launched very high into the air, and of course this was very much the same. And I feel, you know, we must really work on the safety again and consider all these curb business. I feel this is really ridiculous. I mean, he jumped clear over the tires, so what chance does he have?
Well, I think that what we have seen here this afternoon indicates that as good and high a level that we have in Grand Prix safety or Grand Prix circuits, there's still always room for lessons to be learned. And I think the key to this is learning the lesson before somebody gets hurt. And undoubtedly, with the kind of curves that we have at Imola, they're not as steep or severe as many other circuits, but that curving on the exit of a corner as opposed to what you have on the entry to a corner undoubtedly contributed to the spectacular aspect of that accident. Had that curbing not been there, the car would have just plowed into the tower wall. We don't know whether the damage would have been any less or greater. It's one of those things you never do know. You just, as a circuit, you've got to do what you feel is within the current knowledge and safety, right, as well as the minimum standards that are required, and those minimum standards are extremely high. Now, the question of curbing is always a problem, because if you don't have curbs, as I said earlier, drivers take advantage of that and they will drive over parts of the circuit. They will shortcut parts of the circuit. So curbing is there for a very good reason, but it can, of course, lead to secondary problems, and certainly for Barrichello, it created a major problem.
Yeah, absolutely right, John, but I still feel also the runoff area and a reasonably fast entry like this one, the runoff area and the safety margin you have on the outside is not big enough. And I feel really, you know, we've been so finicky with many circuits in the past that we really must apply it properly everywhere. And, you know, knowing the speed of the cars now and the safety of the chassis, we can't just rest on that. We really have to do a bit more.
Well, I think that's one of the problems that, particularly in the last 2 or 3 years, we've seen cornering speeds yet again rise to such high levels. And, I mean, going back to 10 or 12 years ago, coming through that Marlborough chicane with a lot less horsepower, it was a real art to try and get through there, just breathing the throttle. With a lot more horsepower, you're getting there a lot quicker. With a lot more downforce, you might just be at a similar level, but probably going 20 miles an hour quicker. When you're in control, and these current Formula One cars are fantastic when they're in control, because they just have got levels of grip and handling beyond anybody's dreams. But when something does go wrong, the time you have to recover or react, let alone to recover, is minimal. And you know, the predictability or the messages that you get when something's about to go wrong are just so short that you've got no chance. You're just a passenger, and your fate really lies within the integrity of a corner or a given circuit. Well, this session is due to start probably in a little over 2 minutes. We're waiting for the flag to be shown at 13:40. So qualifying can recommence. Currently quickest Ayrton Senna, 1 minute 22.430. Just over a tenth of a second behind Michael Schumacher, and J.J. Lehto in his first Grand Prix of '94. And a welcome back indeed to J.J. He's been anxiously waiting for the moment in which he could get his hands on the first competitive Grand Prix car in his career, and certainly justifying the team's faith in him. And an amazing recovery from a very severe incident back in early season testing when he went backwards into a wall, chipped 2 vertebrae in his neck. He had an operation in which there's a bone graft from his hip into the neck, and he has been training so hard over the past 3 months to get fit. He's been swimming, running, bicycling, press-ups, skipping, whatever it is he can do to get himself fit, he's been doing it.
Well, John, the latest from the medical center is that Rubens Barrichello is not unconscious. He's talking to the doctors, so that part seems to be okay. and he is able to move his body parts.
Well, I think that confirms what we were watching while Rubens was being taken from his car and then stabilized by the side of the car. In my mind, when you see those situations, I'm not too worried because I feel that the driver's situation is very good indeed. If there's a lot more urgency, then you might think there's a problem. So hopefully Rubens will be up and about. He certainly is going to be very stiff. And as ever, the neck gets a fairly major whiplash. But, you know, racing drivers are tough. And the best cure for a severe bang like that is to get back into the car as soon as you can. Adrenaline is the best anesthetic you can have. So we'll wait and see what happens on Saturday afternoon.
13:40. It should be restarted now. It's not restarted yet, so maybe we get... Yes, it is restarted. So the session recommencing.
Once again, we're watching it now. They've brought it in tighter, and we try to see. It's very difficult because you see the front wheels doing one thing, but you're not quite sure has the problem come from the front or come from the back. And you see the incident as Barrichello rolls over and finally comes to an end.
So can anybody beat Senna's 1:22.430? That's the question. Schumacher is very close, but we haven't seen Damon Hill out on the circuit yet. There's just under 40 minutes to go in the session, which was stopped because of an accident by Rubens Barrichello. And it's very nice, John, to be the only European television station doing this live, because there's lots of people coming in with information on Rubens Barrichello, and he has a concussion. He's got damage to his face, which is what you expected him to have, and but he is talking to the doctor.
Well, that's very good news indeed, and all the fans of Rubens Barrichello throughout the world will be very happy indeed to hear that his condition is extremely good. And now Ayrton Senna making his way down, it looks to me, or in fact he's just left the medical center, having gone down to see how his fellow Brazilian is, as Damon Hill out onto the circuit for the first time this afternoon begins his progress, and Damon putting behind him the frustration of ending up on a gravel trap and shortening the time he had, in fact, to take full advantage of the 23 laps that were available. Damon ended up in the gravel traps on lap 15.
Damon Hill looking very determined after he spun in Ida. And, well, John, there he sort of lost a lot of time. A little bit of a wobble as he came through Acqua Minerale, and it's those little nervy twitches the car gives you that just saps confidence. Acqua Minerale is one of those corners you have to really tug on the wheel, almost pitch the car into the corner. If the back end isn't stable and it lurches around, you're going to be very nervous about trying to keep your foot on the throttle. And again, you can see Damon, the back of that car just stepping under. Here's the point of the circuit where Barrichello went off. You can see how close that tire wall, in fact, is to the circuit from the driver's point of view. Damon Hill was fun, has kept the engine running. Well done, Damon. But John, basically, that is what happened to Damon Hill this morning. He's done a... Well, what's the time he did? He's done a 1:26.9, including a spin. That's not bad, I must say. But it's not what he wanted. But he did take a shortcut. Look, turning in the back end just without warning at all. Goes around. He takes to the grass. Does the underbody power of no good across the curb. Car sort of sags in the suspension and it shakes its head. Damon lights up. I mean, doing something like that around the back of the circuit where no one's watching is one thing, but doing it in front of a grandstand full of people, plus your own team, well, teammate Ayrton Senna ended up in front of his own pit last year when he spun his McLaren into the pit wall. But John, what worries me is that this spin looks very similar to the spin Damon Hill had this morning.
Well, when we were in car with Damon Hill on his first flying lap, there were 2 occasions at least, and probably more, around the lap that we saw, where the car was very, very nervous. That was the back end, without any real warning at all, just suddenly wanting to break away from the front end. We commented on it, and as Damon Hill came up to complete his first flying lap, we saw very clearly indeed the problem that Damon Hill has here this afternoon. In fact, he had it here this morning as well.
But then Damon looked very determined after a spin in Ida, and who knows what's going to happen next. Whoa, Martin!
Well, Martin Brundle ran very wide indeed and stopped the car, Martin. He came very wide out of the second part of the Ravazza onto the grass. The car went into a long looping slide. He tried to slow the car down, but of course on the grass. And let's see again Martin exiting. That's a very rare thing indeed to see Martin Brundle do, make an error. Again, the exit of Ravazza very quick. He just got the car, the 2 right-hand side wheels over the curb. That then almost dragged the car onto the grass. The back end starts its pendulum effect. It just continues all around. Martin onto the brakes. Still doing probably 100 miles an hour, but slowing down very quickly. But as soon as he hits the grass, it's the difference between going from a dry track to a wet track. The grass here is still enough moisture or sap in the grass to, in effect, give the feeling of a wet track.
And what's worse for Martin is that he did not record a time yet. So Martin Brundle, oh sorry, he has. He was 9th fastest. I'm very sorry, Martin. 24.4. So Martin Brundle disappointed, but at least he's in the race provisionally.
Yes, he can go home this evening certainly angry with himself, but at least sleep comfortably because he's accorded a time sufficiently fast to keep him into the top 10. And the yellow flag there just warning Gerhard Berger that there is a car off the track. Not that Grand Prix drivers take a great deal of attention to a static yellow flag. It's one of the factors that sometimes cannot be overstated. When a yellow flag is out, whether it's stationary or waved, you should be prepared and in fact just ease off a little bit. You'd never know quite what the incident is until you've been through at least once.
John, this morning Ukyo Katayama did a 25.0. He's done a 24.2 now and is currently in 7th position. Very good performance by the Japanese driver. While we are watching Gerhard Berger, who was 4th quickest this morning, 0.2 of a second slower than Michael Schumacher, who is currently 2nd fastest. So let's see what Gerhard can do this afternoon. And that engine sounds powerful.
Well, also there's a new Agip fuel available to those companies, those teams contracted to Agip. Ferrari obviously benefiting from it, and equally so is the Minardi team, who have got a mix of 93 and 94 chassis. They've got the 94 corners on the 93 chassis. But Agip have submitted a new fuel sample and it's been approved, and it's meant to be a lot better.
So Gerhard Berger on his first flying lap, and he's taken provisional pole position at 22.113. Well, Gerhard.
Well, I did actually predict it would be no surprise, or I sort of anticipated it would be no surprise to see a Ferrari on the front row of the grid. I'm not sure whether Berger can hold down provisional pole for the remaining part of this session or for Saturday's session, but undoubtedly that is going to be worth a few more thousand people here on Saturday for second day practice and qualifying. And if he can retain a front row position for the Grand Prix, this place will be bedlam on Sunday.
Yeah, that means getting up another half hour earlier, John.
Allowed for Ferrari to be in the front row of the grid for the San Marino Grand Prix at the circuit named after Enzo and his son Dino. I'll buy that.
John, the last Ferrari victory, the 30th of September 1990. and someone has worked out that it's 1,308 days ago.
And Mika Häkkinen out for a second run. Häkkinen currently on the third row of the grid in 6th place. And he's got a Ferrari alongside him. That's Nicola Larini, who's deputizing and doing, in fact, a very respectable job indeed for Gianolesi, who we expect to see here tomorrow, and probably he'll be into the commentary booth, joining all the other ex-Grand Prix drivers. Of course, he's only temporarily in X1. Jean also recovering from compressed vertebrae in his neck following his testing accident a month or so ago at Ferrari's test track at Mugello. Well, Häkkinen coming up now to the back of the circuit. The Avanti Alta, that's the final chicane on the backward leg of the Imola circuit. Now it's the run downhill into the Ravazza corner. This is the point in the circuit where Damon swapped ends and ended up in that sand trap.
Well, we watched the classification, Berger and Senna, Schumacher and Lehto, then Larini and the man you're watching, Mika Häkkinen, 5th and 6th. So that is the situation 7 to 12 we see on our screen, and there is just over 32 minutes to go in this first qualifying session on Friday afternoon here at Imola. Now, can Mika Häkkinen improve? There we see positions 13 through to 18. With Oliver Pennis disappointed in 18th. There were Pedro Lamy 19th, and Paul Belmondo currently in 24th, just behind Roland Ratzenberger and Bertrand Gachot. Haven't seen David Brabham out yet. And of course we haven't seen the time for Barrichello yet. So with just over half an hour to go in this qualifying session, we're going to take a short break here on Eurosport. Please rejoin us after that for more action from Imola. J.J Lehto currently in 4th position, trying to improve on his 1:23.260. He is just over half a second slower than teammate Michael Schumacher. And for the moment, John, I think a very good performance by JJ.
I think it's a great performance for JJ Lehto. Remember, the man has had little time, in fact, in the 94 Benetton. And other than spending some 90-odd laps driving around Tenbury during a test, and then on Tuesday at Silverstone on the South Circuit, he's waited for this opportunity, and one thing is clear, he's making the best of it. JJ being relaxed as ever yesterday. A lot of photographers who wanted to take his picture. He did not have any problems and running very wide over that curb. And let's see what this time will do JJ Lehto. Power it down, he's got 3 seconds to go, and is it an improvement? No, it's not. It's close, but it's not an improvement to his best time so far. Just coming into that final chicane onto pit straight, it's so easy to overdrive going in and then to mix and mess up the corner. Ideally, you want to come in, brake slightly earlier than you expect, get the car in early, but then get the drive on as hard as you can in the process of changing from left to right, because it's out of the corner where the time is lost. Equally, it's out of the corner where the time is gained. So Michael Schumacher, there we see his time, and well, that car is probably not the easiest car to drive. Oh, look at that. I think the reason why we're seeing so many people looking very twitchy and nervy is that they're trying to strike the balance between good top speed and, if you like, the minimum amount of downforce they need for the slower parts of the circuit, and for a corner like Tamburello here, which of course is flat out, 190 miles an hour on the exit of that corner, and the quickest cars reaching just over 200 miles an hour through the Villeneuve curve, under brakes into the Tosser Herb. And then he's
He's done it, but he's also taken pole position. Schumacher, a 1:22.015, and that is a tenth of a second faster than Gerhard Berger. So Schumacher spinning off, there we see it again, but provisional, the fastest. And also out on the circuit is Ayrton Senna.
Well, we've seen probably more of the front runners have moments here at Imola than we've seen at any point during the year. And again, the balance of downforce, because what's going to happen, or what is happening, they're running low downforce to be competitive on the straight. Tosser Happen is one of the slowest, and not the slowest corner on the circuit. And the downforce is minimal at that speed, and if you're just a little bit too anxious turning in or a bit too quick on the wheel, the back will just pirouette round, you sold.
So, Ayrton Senna, the man who scored 64 pole positions in his racing career. This is going to be number 65. He's been on pole position in Brazil, he's been on pole position in Japan, he just has not scored any points yet for his new employer. He looks good there.
Well, he's very, very clean indeed, certainly not using anything like the amount of curve we've seen from other competitors. And Senna, well, don't believe that this is an out-and-out qualifying lap.
Senna, who is currently in third position behind Gerhard Berger. And if we look into seventh, we see Mark Blundell now being the fastest Tyrrell Yamaha driver. But Ayrton Senna, well, that doesn't look like a very quick lap, to be honest. That's slow, 24.0. Well, slow, but I mean, that's a couple of seconds off.
Yes, indeed, and you're looking at Senna on that lap. He was not running wide out of corners. He was not doing what you would expect when you're fully committed to your pole lap. So, it was, in a sense, just building himself up, getting a feel for this particular set of tyres. Now, this is, I think, going to be the lap that he hopes will regain that provisional pole.
Well, Ayrton, who did a 1:21, whoops, look on the paper, 1:21.5 this morning, is the only top driver who has not improved on his morning time so far. So we should see an improvement. He's done 21s this morning. What can he do this afternoon? And there we see Ayrton Senna using more road than he did on his previous lap. So this could well be the lap.
Well, into Ravazza, first part third, second part fourth, and certainly being very, very purposeful, but I would say consciously and deliberately staying off the amount of curve we've seen elsewhere. Now the final thrust across start-finish line, 21.837, and that is back on to provisional pole by just under 0.2 of a second from his protagonist this year, and it's almost like the parrot on his shoulder. Whatever Senna does, he's shadowed, and he's spun now as identical to Schumacher. Now, Williams are running probably more downforce than I would suspect Benetton are, but still probably quite a lot less than Senna would be accustomed to in the first two Grand Prix of the year. And the margin is just so fine.
There we see it again, Ayrton Senna spinning off, but he has taken back that provisional pole position. Michael Schumacher now second, Gerhard Berger is in third, and J.J Lehto fourth. There's a number 27 Ferrari, while we are watching the classification after 40 minutes into the session. And the number 27 Ferrari being driven by the man currently fifth, Nicola Larini, 1.4 seconds behind Ayrton Senna.
And of course it was Larini that really sparked all the controversy in the Pacific Grand Prix in Japan regarding, well, traction control is not the word that would be normally used. There was a form of throttle modulation, I think is the expression that was used. And I was surprised that as a penalty for that indiscretion, he wasn't sent off to Sicily to herd sheep, because certainly it sparked the biggest controversy in Formula One over the last 2 weeks.
Larini, a 1:22.841, that's 0.7 of a second slower than teammate Gerhard Berger, moves him up to 4th position provisionally. And there we see that time on his 7th lap is Nicola Larini, who has now backed off and will probably go back into the pits to have a rethink.
You will find yourself.
Well, Martini got a little bit wide entering into Tossa. The car slid. You saw what happened. That'll take a couple of tenths off his lap, and also the momentum up the hill, up into Tamburello, or into Piratella. That's the double left-hand corner, 4th gear in, 5th on the exit. So Martini trying to improve upon his 1:24.738. Probably not this lap.
Another man out on new tyres was Bertrand Gachot, and we are still waiting for David Brabham and Damon Hill. Damon, you've got 7.5 minutes to get out there and do a time.
Just looking at Bertrand Gachot's time from this morning, he did a 1:27.003. This afternoon, after 7 laps, he's 1.3 seconds slower. As we revert to Martini, can he improve or not? 2 tenths slower, 24.964. So that little moment at the Tossa, he paid the price.
Well, did anyone listen down there? Damon Hill out on the circuit. Damon, that's his first lap, I think. Is that his first lap or his second? It's his first proper flying lap, John.
Well, he made it to this point on his first run, and then he decided to go cross-country, and of course straight back into the pits. Now Damon should have a clear track, and well, there are not many moments, in 6 minutes, in fact 6.5 minutes remaining, enough to give him at least 2 more goes. And well, he will be on a fresh set of tyres for this run. And that's the point where we saw Schumacher and Senna both spin. Damon looked very confident. He turned in and he got the car, I felt the position of the car in Tossa, I would say pretty good, and he was able to get on the par, up the hill.
But John, that first corner, when you get into it and you sort of take the car with a scruff of its neck and it does do what you want it to do, that's a confidence boost, isn't it?
Well, you've got to make the car do what you want it to do, not what it thinks it wants to do. And if it means maybe just giving you a little bit more rear wing, and there is Andrea de Cesaris clobbering his right rear and his Jordan. Well, this has been an awful day indeed. Now the wheel finally off the car, and in fact it's just a tyre. The wheel is still on, and Andrea pulls off, and that was into the chicane before Acqua Minerale. He's now come out of Acqua Minerale and pulled off onto the right-hand side of the circuit, and this has been, I think, arguably the worst day in the history of Jordan Grand Prix since 1991.
Damon Hill improving to a 23.628, now in 8th position, and he will come across those yellow flags for the Cesaris' car. Now, what happened there, John? Could that be just... Ah, that's what happened.
Well, he's exiting, coming out of Piratella, and that's what he did. He went wide over the curb, and no wonder that right rear gave up.
Well, he didn't hit anything.
He was very lucky indeed. He didn't hit anything, and Andrea just trying too hard in the remaining moments of this first qualifying session. Again, curb is being very, very much. You see the reason now why he The tyre well and truly about to come off the rim. Andrea, I suspect, looking for somewhere safe to pull the car off the side of the circuit, and there, somewhat drunkenly, it wobbles its way to safety. So Andrea de Cesaris on his return to Formula One, deputising for Ulsterman Eddie Irvine.
And there's Ayrton Senna. His best lap so far, a 1:21.837. Now, can he improve on that in these dying minutes of the session? 3 minutes and, well, let's say 3.5 minutes to go. So that's 2 laps for Ayrton. And where is Damon? He's improved again a little bit to a 23.199. Let's put him 7th so far, but that's not what he wants.
Well, all the focus back onto provisional pole man Senna. And after a very disappointing start for him to the 94 championship year, is Imola going to be the point where things start to fall into place in the way people predicted when it was known that Senna would be joining Williams and Renault? 25.148, and that is a further 0.3 of a second improvement. And now just over half a second under Alain Prost's pole position from 1993.
And that's roughly what he did this morning, John.
But this is the point on his first run that he did lose the back end of the car. A little bit more circumspect through it this time. But I think maybe teams have tried to pinch too much top speed to the detriment of the low speed handling. And in Imola, while there are some very high speed corners, the aerodynamics basically look after a car in those corners. It's when you've got low speed chicanes or a hairpin bend like Tosa, where the entry speed is maybe around about 60 miles an hour, 70 miles an hour at maximum. The level of downforce at that speed is very low indeed. So great care is needed. Now, to put a rear wing up, or put what we call a gurney flap, a return flap in the rear wing, might rob you of 3 or 4 miles an hour on the straight. But if it gives you that additional security in those lower speed corners, it's got to be the quicker way to go in my view.
Senna going through the last chicane onto the straight. And let's wait for the time. Is it faster yet again? No, it's not.
Well, I thought Senna might have taken that lap somewhat easier than his first run on this set of tyres. It was 0.3 slower than the provisional pole. So he must be, I think, content with the performance now in this qualifying session. He certainly hasn't chosen to go back to the pit slowly. He's basically got time for one more lap. 1 minute remaining in Friday's qualifying session for the San Marino Grand Prix. And Damon Hill about to have his final flying lap also.
Are they going to stay with Damon Hill, who did a 23.485, and well, Damon's backed off. That's the end of his session then. So disappointing. That's not a birthday present for his wife Georgie, who's got a birthday today. And Stefan says not what she wanted either, I think, John.
Not at all. And of course, the worst aspect of it is it creates more pressure. You yourself will feel frustration at that error going across the grass at the final chicane onto pit straight, losing time in the session. Teammate, of course, Senna provisionally on pole position by 1.5 seconds, and that could be 1.5 years. Well, there's no doubt that Damon has got the ability to put himself onto the front row. Michael Schumacher, who's currently alongside Senna, is half a second behind Senna. So somewhere in that half second is where Damon Hill wants to find himself on Saturday afternoon.
He probably wants to find himself in front of Ayrton Senna, John. With no cars out on the circuit anymore. The checkered flag is out. Ayrton Senna is on the provisional pole position. It's his 65th if it stays like this. Michael Schumacher is second. Then the second row, Gerhard Berger and J.J. Lehto. Then, oh, very good by J.J., who improved to a 22.717 and is only 0.7 away from Michael Schumacher. Thumbs up, John. Nicola Larini 5th, Heinz-Harald Frentzen 6th. Another very good performance. Disappointment for Damon Hill. Hakkinen 8th, 9th, Morbidelli, yes, very good, and 10th, Mark Blundell. 11th, Carl Wendlinger. 12th, Ukio Katayama. 13th, Pierluigi Martini. 14th, Michele Alboreto. 15th, Martin Brundle. Then it's Christian Fittipaldi 16th. 17th, Eric Bernard. Olivier Panis, Johnny Herbert and Andrea De Cesaris completing the top 20. Eric Comas is 21st. First, Pedro Lamy, Beretta, David Brabham, Roland Ratzenberger and Bertrand Gresho. They are the qualifiers. Belmondo and Barrichello are out for the moment. You can see all the names and all the times on your screen at the moment. And John, a good top 13.
Very competitive, and for many people, well, the sight of Senna yet again topping provisional qualifying times is ominous. Imola is a circuit which undoubtedly is going to favour horsepower. It is inevitable that Williams and Renault were going to get the performance of the FW16 to where people expected it to be at the start of the year. Schumacher, Benetton and Ford were dissatisfied this morning with the overall handling and performance of the Benetton chassis, but don't underestimate Benetton and Ford, or for that matter, Michael Schumacher, because 20 points lead in the championship and 2 victories so far. He's not about to sit back and allow Senna to stick his foot into the door.
And with all respect to Jos Verstappen, he's got J.J. Lehto backing him up in a big way at this moment. This was Imola for today. We hope you enjoyed it, and we'll be back tomorrow, same time, same place, for the second qualifying session for the Grand Prix. Bye for now. See you tomorrow.
The Formula One World Championship is brought to you on Eurosport by Ford, Formula One's most successful team. Hitachi. Elf Fuel, World Champion. And Goodyear.
Eurosport News.